In a world where nuclear war has begun, vampires fought back in super real 3D.
The Maharajah Flamenco Trio is an awesome group, a really cool dynamic song. It had a lot of instrumentation in it that I've never gotten to do in a music video, and that was really enticing. I always am on the hunt for doing something that's fun and unique and something that I don't have in my portfolio, because I consider every piece that I do an opportunity to grow my portfolio as well. It's a collaboration when I'm teaming up with any artist or company to make something that we're all proud of. I'm not really in this to make stuff that just gets me by and gets a paycheck. Like, we all put in extra effort on every project to make sure that it's as good as we can make it. It was really cool getting to collaborate with my son on it, because this was the first time that he's ever been in something where it was actually a paid project, and see him as a 10-year-old step up to the plate and do some rather physically taxing things. I mean, to go out on the primitive trail of Port Joseph, St. Joseph Peninsula State Park, Cape Sandblast, to go out on that, you have to walk a couple of miles, like in thick sand, and we were lugging gear, and he held up. We were walking back from the shoot in pitch blackness. We didn't even bring a flashlight with us. We were so physically exhausted. It was definitely up there as one of the most taxing physical film days that I've done, because there was a lot of just full blast running to get shots, and I wanted all these shots done from a really long distance away with a long lens, because that has a certain look to it, which meant I was running back and forth. It helps to be in shape to carry all this gear around, and to give that extra, have that energy available to go get those extra types of shots. And that's a big deal. For the most part, like 90% of this was naturally lit. And in most cases, most of the videos that I get the opportunity to light things, and I love lighting things, but this storyline really needed outdoor stuff, and it's very hard to compete with daylight when you're using light. So it's more about timing your day to hit those golden hours, is what they call it. If you've ever seen the movie The Revenant, they filmed that entire movie over the course of 9 months, and they would basically just film for an hour and a half a day. They would wait for that golden hour to happen roughly around dusk, and then they had the perfect lighting. And they did add some lights to it, but ultimately a lot of it was naturally lit, and they played off of filming it during that time. So they did that every single day. So that's a big difference than filming like a straight 15 hours on a set versus only getting an hour and a half a day. And that, hence, the movie took 9 months to film, and it was cold, and they had to hike all the gear out there every day. It's an interesting story. You can look it up on YouTube. But in our case, I wanted to try and at least get that for some of the shots. We don't have, I can't allot 9 months to a singular video unless the budget's there, which is, that's a much larger scale that I'd like to do someday. Sure. I did my best. I did get a lot of those types of shots in the video, and they're my favorite shots. There is something magical about that golden hour of diffused light and the color spectrum. The hawk in it actually was right here on my property. There is a hawk that lives out here on the property, and it's great. He was on the vine right there, and I set up a long lens, and I filmed that like 4 or 5 weeks before I filmed this video. I was thinking about using it for the Trans Am video, but it just didn't work right, and it made sense for this video, so I put it in this video. And also there's a shot with a deer in the video, and that was a pretty surreal experience. I was walking back on this trail completely by myself, and I had to carry the Revenant, which is a stabilization unit that how I get those steady shots. And it was pretty heavy, and I was pretty tired, and I was very taxed, and everything was turned off, and then there was a deer in the pathway about 50, 60 feet up. And I froze, and that's the cool thing about that Cape Sandblast, is that there's just so many deer out there and so much different wildlife. And I froze, and I was like, oh, man, I wish my camera was on. If I turn it on, it's going to scare it off. Like if I set everything down, boot it up. But I was like, man, I got to just go for it. I was so tired. I set it down, I booted it up, and then the deer had not left yet. So I start walking towards it, and I'm going towards the deer. And then eventually I'm like 5-6 feet away from the deer, and then the deer jumps into the bushes. So I've you hold the Ronin like this with 2 handles on either side, and the camera is suspended in the middle. And so I turn like this to catch the deer. And what happens is there's actually a baby deer that young deer, that's the one that's in the video. That was not the one I went up there filming. And it was there right behind the bush. It was just little baby deer. And so then me and the deer just kind of looked at each other for a good solid minute or so. And it was very curious as to this crazy unit that I was using, because the way that the unit works, I should be demonstrating it. Maybe I'll do a pickup shot of this later. But you can turn it one way or the other, and it keeps the camera level. So it's a very bizarre looking thing. It's very intriguing. And the deer was captivated by it. And then eventually the deer walked off. But it was a really neat moment in my life. Just having that connection with the deer. It's really neat when you're on the lookout for having these magical moments. I mean, these are great opportunities when you go out there and film. It's not about just getting a job done. It's about going and having an experience. So this was really meaningful to me, getting those little magical moments. Anyway, back to the edit aspect. There was a tremendous amount of footage. Had to go through everything. And what I had to do a lot of, or what I did do a lot of, was, I did a lot of compositing. So you'll have, in order to get maximum dynamic range, all right? So what would normally happen when you take a picture with a camera, you'll see, a lot of people know about dynamic range, but for those of you who don't, because this is for the average person, basically you're trying to get the brightest brights and the darkest darks, and you want to have detail and information and all that. So then you get this picture where nothing's pitch black and nothing's blown out white. And that's gonna happen inevitably, unless you're using a really high-end camera, and even then it happens, and you have to cheat it, and you have VFX artists that cover that stuff up with sky replacements and such. And I don't do sky replacements yet. I'd like to learn how at some point on a budget that could afford me taking the time to do it. And anyway, so what I am doing is basically stacking maybe 2 or 3 different takes, or all on top of each other. So I'll get the sky from one take, and I'll get the middle part from one take, and then I'll get the bushes that are right up next to me on another take. And so I'll basically take that picture and strip it into 3 different parts, or whatever works for what the type of shot is. And I'll set different exposure values for each of those, and different color. Different saturation points. As you adjust your exposure up and down, the brighter it is, the more desaturated it's going to get, and the darker it is, the more saturated it becomes automatically. So if you're bringing the exposure down in a photo or in your video, if you're messing around with that, it's immediately going to get very saturated. You don't want to just bring the exposure down and bump up the saturation, because that's already happening for you. So be mindful of that. Being part of your balance and what you're figuring things out as. Other times I was able to just kind of trace out masks, and basically you're just kind of tracing out the part that you want to be a certain way and this part a certain way. I'll also trace out heads, I'll trace out eyes sometimes and sharpen eyes. There's a lot of things that you can do, and then you have to motion track all that. And hence, this is why it takes roughly a week of just color grading. So, when we're talking about making a music video, it's usually scattered days of correspondence with me and the client leading up to the shoot, and that can take, if you add it all together, roughly a week or so, usually. And then the actual filming is usually, there's the pre-production setup if you can get access to the areas, and getting all the props together and all that can be a couple of days, and then you actually film, and that's a few days, and then you bring back footage and you have to ingest it, and I film in very juicy, massive size codecs. We're talking about, a lot of this was shot in RAW, and Sony's RAW is no joke when it comes to data. We're talking about at 24 frames per second, you can fill up, in RAW data, you can fill up with 51 minutes, you can fill up a terabyte. So you film for 51 minutes, you got a terabyte of footage, and hence this project ended up coming in at close to 8 terabytes by the time we were done filming. I did not shoot everything in RAW. I chose what I wanted to shoot in RAW. The rest of it was ProRes, which is a very juicy, intense codec too, but not nearly on the level of that RAW. The data archiving aspect of that is you need to capture it, and you back it up again, and then you're going to want to have it hosted on some kind of RAID system, a combination of hard drives that are collectively working together to speed up how fast they can operate, right? So they're basically making each other more powerful into this one unit. So it's becomes one giant hard drive that's super fast, and that can handle this kind of footage. So you're talking about having it 3 times, all right? So that's going to eat into your your cost as well, because you have to have a couple of hard drives that are external drives. That's the way I like to do it, that stay unplugged from walls. And then in addition to that, have it hosted onto my RAID system in my computer. And that's where I'm editing it. But I keep backing things up as I go. And that's really, when you get to this level, you just have to play it safe in that regard. You have to have everything backed up 3 times. I remember when I first started, I back it up once, and in some cases I wouldn't back up stuff. I mean, just insanity. But those are super low budgets, and I just couldn't afford to buy more stuff. So anyway, backing up all that data takes a while. I mean, you're going to tie up the computer for a couple of days because you need to back it up 3 times. And then you have to set up the project, etc. Then you're going to start going through the footage and curating it, and then you're going to edit it, and then you're going to color grade it. So all in all, in most cases, music videos take about 3 weeks to 4 weeks. This project was actually done 6 weeks ago or so. And tomorrow, which will have already happened by the time you see this, because I'm giving you this video like a week late, it is going to premiere at Proof Brewing Company. We're going to put it up on a projection screen, which is cool. It's like roughly a 10-foot screen or something like that. They're going to run the sound to the PA, and hopefully a lot of people come out, and hopefully everybody likes it, both the music and the visual experience. And anyway, that's about it.
Movie voice.